A new media policy in Jammu and Kashmir has made it easier for the Indian government to control and censor news coming out of the troubled region, which it now classifies as a union territory. The new 50-page policy will remain in effect for the next 5 years and authorizes the Directorate of Information and Publication Relations of the UT of Jammu and Kashmir, which is now effectively run by the federal government, to examine the content of print, electronic and other forms of media for fake news, plagiarism and unethical or anti-national activities. It also labels the DIPR as the single nodal agency for the release of all advertisements, communications and messages for all government departments to all newspapers, publications and journals, meaning that every government advertisement will have to be routed through the DIPR. These measures equally apply to all forms of radio, TV and digital media as stipulated by the policy document.
It seems the aim of the media policy is to demolish the local press in Kashmir. We don't know what stories will be labelled as international by the government. It is bizarre to see the policy gives one-sided power to the authorities to decide what's fake news and what's real.
What the new media policy basically does is that it allows the state to create a framework within which it can regulate the journalistic work which is being produced. It basically turns journalists into stenographers who can basically only do PR for the state and nothing more.
The new Media Policy 2020 also gives power to government officials who can now take legal action against journalists and media outlets, and those organizations that breach new policy rules face the threat of being de-empaneled or unlisted and losing government advertising.
There's scope of de-empaneling news organizations from getting government ads, and in a place like Kashmir where economy is also throttled in so many different ways, many news organizations rely on the state. This is taxpayers' money, people like us, taxpayers who are paying these taxes, and the government's job is to regulate it honestly and without partiality. But what is happening here is that the government wants only those news organizations to thrive who toe its line, and that's not the job of journalists. Their job is to speak for the people, and this money is coming from those people.
The new policy also dictates that extensive background checks are now mandated for publishers, editors, and key staff of organizations that seek government advertising. Meanwhile, journalists are to be subjected to similar checks for accreditation.
We see all this new media policy an extension of all that process of trying to silence, intimidate, and threat the media in Kashmir. And the authorities have tried to, basically increase the surveillance on journalists. They have been interfering with the work of journalists. Many have been harassed, especially since August last year, when the government imposed a strict clampdown on and blocked all the communication services. But this new media policy brings with it the brazenness of the authorities with which they are trying to and attempting to control the press, especially the local media.
In the aftermath of the Indian government's revocation of Article 370 that removed Jammu and Kashmir's semi-autonomous status in August of last year, the Kashmir Valley has been subjected to regular media blackouts and internet blockades. The internet was, in fact, restored in late January, but people were only allowed to access 153 whitelisted sites at 2G speeds. Access to all websites was finally granted on March 20, but was still restricted to 2G connections. Blockouts still occur on the regular, with internet shutdowns occurring on 12 different days in June and at least 6 times up until the middle of July. The media blockouts, slow internet speeds and overall inaccessibility have severely hindered journalists from reporting from Kashmir. And the latest Media Policy 2020 will make it even more difficult for them to report on the injustices that continue to occur in the Kashmir Valley.